what's coming up next? What's coming up next, as I mentioned, is the effervescent Emily Freeman. She's going to be opening up today's content with a talk about incident response. The title of the talk is Moving Beyond the Reaction. So, tech has spent ages treating incidents as something that engineers, just to respond to. They measure them, hopefully prevent them, I guess is sort of the idea. But Emily's going to ask the question, what would happen if we just said, incidents, they're going to happen. They're part of the development life cycle, and we just have to kind of internalize that, right? What does that mean if we start treating incidents as I don't know, inevitable features, perhaps? Guess we'll find out. So thank you so much for joining us. Emily, we're gonna have a little Q&A afterwards, but for now, it's enough for me. I'll pass the mic over to you. Emily Freeman, everybody.
Thank you so much. And I'm so pleased with the term effervescent. I think I should add this to my bio. I've never been described that way, but I love it. I'm thrilled to be here with you all. Also, happy birthday, Sasha. That's huge. Sasha is an amazing human if you haven't had a chance to interact with her. If I were an element on the periodic table, I would be in the reactive section. My natural inclination is to sort of pop off, to react, often immediately. And I've had to learn to respond rather than react. Now, for humans, the solution to that is therapy. Spent plenty of time with that. For socio-technical systems, the solution is practice. I like focusing on incident response, not incident management. Incident management feels like a situation you come across, you handle, and then you never come back to. It's just sort of over. Our emergency management services tackle fires, hurricanes, tornadoes, all kinds of natural disasters that threaten our homes and impact our lives. And we take a lot of inspiration from those patterns of management because they work. They're well thought out. The execution is proven. But that's not the entire story, is it? A software incident, it's not a fire or a hurricane. It can feel like that. It certainly gives you this adrenaline response. When talking about this topic, I like the word response over management because for me, it better reflects the repetitive nature of incidents. We're going to have incidents, a lot of them, forever. This is part of our life. For me, it's not about trying to eliminate incidents. It's about making them smaller, more expected tasks, even standard parts of our workday. And that requires a unique approach to architecture, development, and operations. I'm Emily Freeman. I'm the author of DevOps for Dummies and the co-curator of 97 Things Every Cloud Engineer Should Know. I lead community engagement at AWS, and I am passionate about all things DevOps, dev tools, and developer communities. I want to take a moment to step back from the topic at hand and discuss how we communicate as an industry. And really, if I'm honest, to blame Twitter for everything. Because why not throw them under the Tesla? Twitter has been useful in a lot of ways. We all have access to each other in a way that we just didn't before. We are connected, and that's a really good thing. But I think the character limit, the algorithms, probably our attention spans, it's all damaged our tolerance of nuance. And this isn't just a Twitter problem. I just like to pick on Twitter. This is a much more global human issue. There's another layer to this, something bigger, almost invisible. In social media, there's something called context collapse. The term was coined by Dana Boyd. You know I love a social scientist. Context collapse is the flattening of multiple audiences into a single context. You and your close friends have a lot of shared context formed over time throughout your friendships. You and your work colleagues have the shared context of your workplace, the unique institutional customs and knowledge. Words are really powerful. It's why I love them. And we're seeing the power of words to unify and inspire play out in real time with Volodymyr Zelensky's leadership in the midst of Putin's invasion in Ukraine. But words are not enough. I am continuously frustrated by the limitation of my own rather verbose spoken language. We lack words that would convey deep meaning in specific contexts. They just don't exist yet, at least not in every language. I think it's these gaps that contribute to a lot of the societal conflict and misunderstandings. But words are our only real medium with which to convey complex thoughts and ideas, feelings to other humans. As you move away from those in-groups of shared context, your friends, your colleagues, your neighbors, we begin to enter groups with which we have no reputation, no trust, no mutual understanding. Which means the thing that was super funny and lighthearted in your group text is now being wildly misinterpreted by people you've never heard of. That's the gift of the retweet. Your words reach people that have none of the context that enveloped your original remark. Now, my point in saying this isn't that I think the phenomenon is just relegated to social media. I think it's bled into our other communities. It's impacting how we communicate with each other in every medium. Now, I define community as people or places in tech where there is people can share their experiences, their ideas, they learn. Now, we have a lot of communities in tech, and there's a lot of overlap. You likely belong to multiple communities within the broader industry. There's been this flattening of advice, dare I say thought leadership, that's been reduced to little quips and funny retorts. I think we're better than that. I think we're some of the smartest people on the planet, and we are capable of gathering together, thinking critically about a concept, even if we don't immediately agree. We're capable of sitting with that, working through nuance, ruminating on the good, the bad, the weird, the undefined. I think we're capable of having much more complex discussions than we are currently participating in. There's a lot of over-indexing right now on how to implement the ideas of others, rather than taking inspiration from those ideas and tailoring that to our own unique circumstances. You see that right now with DevOps. Somewhere along the line, we lost our focus on reducing silos and building bridges, and instead began to put more and more load onto individuals. One of the unintended consequences of DevOps has been this pressure or belief that everyone has to do everything. That a JavaScript developer has to understand the intricacies of an application CI/CD pipeline or the details of cloud architecture. And on the other side of that coin, there's been this extreme focus on developers lately that's left operations engineers feeling somewhat ignored, even unsure of their role. DevOps is not a methodology that encourages everyone to do everything. It's ridiculous. We all have specialties, and we should lean into our personal and professional strengths, relying on others to buttress our weaknesses. Before we had DevOps, we had something a little like this. There was just no overlap. Developers would write code with zero concern about security, testing, operations, nothing. It was the good old days. They typed into their machines, and once that program compiled, it was someone else's problem. This caused a lot of frustrations. As you know, many of us lived through it. Now, the first name of DevOps was Agile System Administration. Naming is hard. In other words, how do you bring Agile principles to infrastructure and operations? I believe the intention of DevOps was something like this overlap. It's communication and shared processes. This is an awareness of the complexities and concerns of your colleagues in different roles. It's collaboration, teamwork. This makes me happy. But somehow we ended up here. And y'all, if I contributed to this, I am sorry, because this is not the answer at all. It's like we overlaid the SDLC with developers and just said, ship it. It's fine. The lack of nuance in messaging, the compression of ideas and thoughts and methodologies led us here. Now, this problem is deeply integrated with incident response. It's important that people have ownership and accountability over the services that they build. But creating an organization following the interpretation of DevOps that says developers are responsible for the entire life cycle of their code is, well, I've very rarely seen it be successful. Not only because it eliminates or demoralizes specialty groups outside of development, but because you're asking developers at that point to be an expert in a stack of languages and tools, an expert in security and testing and deploying and releasing code, an expert in operations and infrastructure, identifying and fixing problems on the fly. I mean, maybe y'all are superhuman. I'm not. I'm overwhelmed just thinking about trying to be an expert in not only one area, but half a dozen. I order half a dozen bagels, not areas of expertise. That's too much. I'm guessing I'm not alone in this. In fact, I'm guessing some of you all feel ill-equipped to both ship software that is resilient to failure and respond to incidents. I think developers and engineers of all kinds do their best work when they feel empowered and fulfilled and happy. I think to achieve this, we have to take a step forward and think about what's next. How do organizations not only apply DevOps in a way that increases velocity, but design their teams and socio-technical systems for resiliency? This requires us to look at the full software delivery process, because incident response isn't just about getting better at responding to incidents. It's about reducing the quantity, severity, and scope of incidents. Like children, our applications grow and change in ways that both horrify and delight us because we are at the will of a force we cannot control, the customer. So how do we proceed? If you're anything like me, you have moments where you doubt yourself, questioning your talent, your purpose, even the value of your impact. It's so much easier to become paralyzed by fear and uncertainty. If we can't possibly know how to proceed, how do we keep moving forward? For me, I believe the first step is accepting that in modern software development, there is no beginning and end. We are in a constant state of motion. And part of that shift is eschewing the old way of thinking about our work. Last year, I pitched a radical new idea, a replacement of the SDLC. If you're familiar with this idea, you can take 4 minutes and go grab a cup of coffee or tea. There's longer, more in-depth talks on the topic, but I'll quickly summarize so that we're all on the same page. You're likely very familiar with the software development cycle, what we call the SDLC. I was shocked to find out that the SDLC has been around since the 1960s. The SDLC is a boomer. That's disturbing. And over all these years, it's remained more or less the same. Beyond being linear and unreflective of our daily work, for me, I think the biggest issue with the SDLC is that it's become an assumption. We don't even think about it anymore. Let me show you. When DevSecOps became the first derivative of DevOps, it sought to move security left. This should show you the pervasiveness of the SDLC, a phrase meant to bring awareness and consideration of security early in the software development process at the time of planning and designing, assumed a reference to the construct. I think assumptions limit us. I think they make the already difficult task of communicating even more difficult. The models we use, the ways we discuss our work impacts our work. I think we need a model capable of capturing the multi-threaded, non-sequential nature of our work, as well as embody the roles engineers take on and the considerations they encounter along the way. What I settled on is the revolution model. I believe this visualization is capable of capturing the pivotal moments of any software scenario. I call it revolution because it revolves, at least in theory. I needed it to be static here. Its circular shape reflects the continuous and iterative nature of our work, but also because it is revolutionary. I'm challenging a 60-year-old model that is embedded into our daily language. The revolution model is constructed of 5 concentric circles describing the critical roles of software development, and I'll explain that in a moment. They are architecting, developing, automating, deploying, and operating. Intersecting each loop are 6 spokes that describe the production considerations every engineer must consider throughout their engineering work. These are testability, securability, reliability, observability, flexibility, and scalability. The circles that create that base of the model is a shift in thinking about our roles as engineers. We have long used personas as a way to group people, but personas bug me because I think they oversimplify someone's career or needlessly complicate it. Few people fit cleanly and completely into persona-based buckets anymore. The lines have gotten very fuzzy. Most critically, I believe personas are immutable. A persona is wholly dependent on how someone identifies themselves. It's intrinsic, not extrinsic. Our titles and jobs change, but we likely still consider ourselves a specific persona. A programmer, a developer, a database admin, an IT pro, security engineer. I was a developer. I will always identify as a developer. It influences how I see myself and how I approach my work. Roles are very different. They are temporary, inconsistent, constantly fluctuating. Your work isn't confined to a single set of skills. It may have been a decade ago, but not today. There's an even more important concept. We aren't just devs or ops or QA anymore. We play all of those roles at various times. And no matter what role we play, we have to consider a number of issues. The first is testability. All software systems require testing to assure architects that designs work, developers that code works, engineers of all disciplines that code changes won't bring down the system. Testing in its many forms is what enables systems to be durable and have longevity. Security is everyone's responsibility, but I'd argue few understand how to design and execute secure systems. I struggle with this. I'm having to learn about this. I think security is something we all know we should dedicate time to, but don't often make time for. And it's hard and complicated, and the stakes are really, really high. It's absolutely critical that applications and services work as expected most of the time. You know this. But we often talk about availability as a synonym for reliability, when it's really just a single concept and an aspect of the concept. If a system is available, but customer data is inaccurate or out of sync, the system is not reliable. Reliability is the end result, but I think resiliency is the journey, the action engineers can take to improve reliability. Observability is the ability to have insight into your application or system. It's that telemetry and monitoring, even alerting. There's an aspect of observability that overlaps with reliability, but the purpose isn't just to maintain a reliable system. The concept actually originates in linear dynamic systems and is defined as how well the internal states of a system can be understood based on information about its external outputs. Observability is more than about understanding than anything else. Flexible systems absorb new code smoothly. They embody a clean separation of concerns and are typically partitioned into small components. These systems are architected to enable the now and the next. Because in our work, the only constant is change. And in every role we play, creating flexible solutions that will grow as the applications grow is critical. Scalability refers to more than a system's ability to scale for additional load. It's the growth, the ability to grow over time. Scalability in the revolution model carries the continuous innovation of a team and the byproducts of that growth within a system. For me, it's the most human of the considerations. It requires each of us in our various roles to consider everyone around us, our customers, our colleagues, even our future selves. We have to debug that code written by us. It's cruel. One of the reasons I'm so passionate about this model is that it democratizes accountability. Accountability can have a massive impact on incident response. Now, I prefer the word accountable over responsible. Accountability is a willingness to account for one's actions, whereas responsibility is having control over a situation or a duty to deal with an issue. The best example I have of this is parenting. I have a 7-year-old daughter. She's the light of my life. And as a mom, I'm responsible for keeping my child alive, providing basic necessities, food, shelter, clothing, etc. But the higher order function I have in her life is to love her, to model the principles I value, to train her to be an independent, functioning human. And that's where I am accountable to her. I make decisions every day. We all do. And we never know if we're choosing correctly. But I do know that I know the information that I used to make the decision and how I came to the conclusion I did. When she's older, I'll be able to account for my decisions. And even in the cases where I'll have chosen incorrectly, I have confidence that I made the best choice given the data I had at the time. That's all we can do, especially in incidents. The model many of us are currently working in puts all of the responsibility into a single role. I want to back out of that really quickly and embrace accountability. I believe Revolution can help redirect us from a developer-centric interpretation of DevOps to an implementation that enables flexibility, respect, shared accountability. The model calls out specific specialties and areas of domain expertise. And this is important because these areas will always be critical to our shared success. Not in a way that means a single role carries the weight of the entire system or even part of it. It rejects the notion that experts who do not identify as developers are somehow second-class citizens. This is a culture where everyone stands on equal ground. Everyone has visibility into the work of others, and everyone is committed to the success of their peers. This creates a culture where teams can respond to incidents rather than react to downtime. Now let's look at how this actually works in practice. Take something like testability. A developer, at a minimum, is responsible for unit tests to verify the behavior of the features they implement or the bugs they fix. I'd argue they should be doing additional tests. That's a different talk. Anyone working to automate processes and remove that manual toil should be automating tests. These tests run every time code is committed to the main branch. Any continuous integration or deployment pipeline should have integration tests or end-to-end tests implemented. These are just a few of the intersections of roles and considerations. And you can measure this. The metric of test coverage is absolutely flawed, but it is a way of noting the testability of a system, a service, or a class. Engineer opinions are data as well. I think we over-index sometimes on quantitative data, when qualitative data from experts can be just as valuable. This is just one example. You can utilize this model as a way of measuring a baseline and reevaluating progress at set intervals. You know the gaps in data available to you. You know what data you have to look at. Utilize that data when it's available and fill in the gaps with that qualitative data. Even an assumption is a better anchor than nothing when attempting to establish a baseline. Each of these areas impact incident response. This model normalizes work in a way that the SDLC never did, because our work is never finished. I struggle with housework. I'm a bit of a slob. Don't tell my mom. Just kidding. She knows. One of the reasons my home is always a bit messy, or a lot messy, depending on the day of the week, is that I'm not diligent about regular tidying. It turns out that people who always have clean homes tidy constantly. They put things away every time. They do the dishes every night. It's wild. They clean constantly. But it's that diligence and regular attention that creates a clean space. Our work is pretty similar to this. There's no finishing something and then moving on. Everything we build must be maintained. Every piece of code must be updated or deprecated. And it's this regular attention that holds the key to better incident response. Because incident response isn't about avoiding incidents, but making them part of our regular work. There are generally 5 levels of incident severity. If you want more details than I can give in the next few minutes, I highly recommend the incident response content published by PagerDuty. It's amazing. Sev 1 is the most grave type of incident. Functionality is severely impacted. A large percentage of customers can't use the product. These incidents carry the risk of violating service level agreements or SLAs and typically require public statements to address the issue. SEV2 is a severe product or service degradation that impacts a large number of customers. SEV3 can escalate to SEV2 incidents if they're not responded to immediately. These incidents typically impact a smaller group of customers or involve a single service. SEV4 incidents do not affect a customer's ability to use the product. Maybe the service is slow or there's a lag, something's not working as expected. SEV5 incidents are really bugs. Customers notice something odd, but they can still utilize the product for the most part. And feature function generally works as expected. There is a distinct bifurcation between the first two severity categories and the latter three. SEV1 and SEV2 incidents are major incidents and require an immediate and large-scale response. The others are much easier to address. We are never going to eliminate incidents. There will always be issues and bugs and performance problems and outages. But we need to start treating incidents like normal work that requires fewer SEV1 and SEV2 incidents. In major incidents, you have no choice but to react. Stress is high. This distracts from the ongoing proactive work. It creates technical debt, and it wears out engineers. You can only do that so many times. The more these severe incidents occur, the more people begin to feel like their job is a series of Sisyphean tasks. We want boring JIRA tickets that get moved up to the top of the priority list. That sounds nice and boring. And to accomplish that, it's less about your actual incident response processes and more about planned, small improvements measured over time. The shared accountability model of Revolution acknowledges that there is no beginning or end in software development, not anymore. The incident response isn't a perfect line. There's no beginning and end. It's continuous, diligent work. I believe this model, while not perfect, gets us closer to the next phase of DevOps. It captures the ever-changing complexity of modern socio-technical systems, and it emphasizes workflows and processes that make the right thing the easy thing. Thank you. Slava Ukraini.
You know, in this year of our Lord 2022, you think I would have figured out how to Zoom.
I know. We've had 2 years, and it's like, I still do it.
Every time, right? Every time. Except this time I get to do it in front of like 400 complete strangers on the internet. So, hey, it's all good. All right. Well, thank you so much for that. Super interesting. And I mean that sincerely, super interesting talk. Like every slide you put up, I was like, no, just spend the rest of your time talking about that one.
I know. Right. It's true. I feel like this is an introductory talk, and then I need to like dive into each thing.
Yeah, no, that's 100%. That's 100% it. So, there's a lot of comments already coming in on the chat. Everybody was like, "This is amazing! Rocket ships, hands up in the air, perfect, et cetera, et cetera." People are super excited about it. I'll give people an opportunity to get their questions in, but to sort of kick it off, I've been furiously writing notes as we go through here. There's a piece of terminology that you use a couple of times, and I just want to make sure everybody's on board with it. And that is, what is a socio-technical system?
Thank you for asking that. We often talk about socio-technical systems in DevOps because your system is not just the code or the infrastructure, the sort of technical bits that make up your applications. Your system also involves us, the humans that work on it. And you'll often see that the human bits are reflected in the technical bits, whether it's good or bad. And so we put it all together to kind of appreciate that there are two elements to these systems and that we are one of them.
Excellent. Okay, super. So first question from the audience here. This will be on. Do you have any other talks or materials on your new Revolution model that are available?
Yes, YouTube is our friend, and there's tons of talks on this that go a little bit more deep into the various segments, and then I'm working on other content around this. It is something that I'm passionate about. It is something I think that is helpful. I'll let the community tell me if they think I'm right or wrong on that, but I'm working furiously to make sure that we have more content on that, and specifically how to actually implement it, right? I think, a lot of ideas are good on paper and they sound great in a talk, but how do you actually apply this to your current system and build that bridge? So people have asked lots of good questions and I've had to consider them, but I want this to be a community effort. So people, like, you can always find me on Twitter, Editing Emily. There's a GitHub repo under me in GitHub on this talk. You're welcome to put in all sorts of comments, questions, suggestions. I would love your participation.
Excellent. Fantastic. And I can't speak for the organizers, but I'm sure all that information, slides, recordings, all will be made available afterwards. So don't worry, everybody watching, we'll make that all available for you. So again, just from my notes here, a couple of quotes I think were just excellent. I order half a dozen bagels, not areas of expertise. I really like that. Right? It's sort of, I'd actually like to dive in a little bit on that, right? When you say, you order half a dozen bagels, right? The idea is that it's a transaction, right? And that you're receiving goods, right? But, not areas of expertise. Like, what makes areas of expertise different from ordering bagels?
Yeah. I mean, first of all, they don't come in an egg flavor, which is crime against humanity. I think, areas of expertise, there's so many, we struggle with this as an industry because I think we all love to be smart and we all want to, be the masters of everything. We have new ideas all the time and we dive into things. So for instance, I'm trying to learn more about security this year. I've realized this is something that keeps coming up in my career, and the fates have decided that I need to know more about this. So I can read my books. I can talk to people in that area of expertise. I can learn as much as I possibly can, but I'm still a novice. I would never say that I'm a security expert. And so, there's layers to the depth of someone's area of expertise. And I think that's part of it as well. If you have JavaScript on your resume, well, that could mean a lot of different things. You could have made one application in JavaScript, or you could be, a complete expert. So that's one of the differences for me.
For sure.
I guess it should be a croissant. I think areas of expertise are croissants, not bagels. There's layers.
Croissant. Yeah, really good.
Sorry, you're French and I butchered that. Sorry.
No, don't worry about it. When I'm in the United States and I see one at the Starbucks or whatever, and I have to force myself to say I want a croissant.
Croissant.
Die a little every time, a little inside.
Our accent is so brassy sometimes. It's just like croissant. Okay.
So we got another question from the audience here. It's actually about that model again. I think that this model is really hitting home for a lot of people, and it's hitting home for me. I also want to learn more about it, frankly. Are there any examples, real world examples, of people that have or organizations that have implemented this model, or at least have considered it, maybe done test trials of it?
Yeah, I know of one. I don't totally know if they're comfortable with me announcing it, but they used it as a way of really assessing how they were doing in their sort of like DevOps transitions. And so they changed a few of the spokes, which I also really loved because they made it their own. I talked about this earlier. I think we need more of that. There's the like snowflake syndrome, but there's also taking something and thoughtfully making it your own. And I love that. And so they changed some of the spokes to better reflect their socio-technical system. And they created a radar map on top of it and kind of ranked each spoke 0 to 10, and are using that as a baseline and kind of progressing from there. So that was exciting, but it is relatively new. And I haven't, created the content around how to actually make this transition. Like we utilize the SDLC constantly in every meeting I go to, it comes up. It's just part of it. And you don't even realize it until you're paying attention. And so that shift is a huge shift for folks.
Yeah, for sure. And as you said, it's prevalent. It's the air we breathe. It's the matrix, right? You can't escape it.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So getting at that is tricky. And there's a couple more questions that have come in here, along that vein, right? So, one of the questions/comments is that DevOps appears to be more of a software computer term. Any thoughts on, sort of engineering ops model in manufacturing? And then we talked with SDLC, we talked about the revolution model. Is that something that is strictly related to software, or is it something that could also be applied to, manufacturing and engineering in the way that, the SDLC was born from that?
Yeah.
Is there a relationship there?
I mean, certainly. I mean, I made a joke in one of my other talks for GitHub. Actually, it was we for manufacturing. One of the reasons I don't think the SDLC works for us is it did originate in manufacturing, and if you're building a car, once you put the driver's side door on, it stays on. It's there. If you adjust the catalytic converter, that does not impact the door. The door doesn't fall off because you made an adjustment over here. Not typically, unless something's really wrong with your line. Software is not like that. We have all these hidden dependencies. And so it's a very different industry for me at this point. It used to reflect the manufacturing a lot more. And I think when you see early sort of derivatives of DevOps and interpretations of DevOps, you see this a lot, like lean software development, lean manufacturing, like these things are related. But for me, the delta between those has become much larger. I'm not in manufacturing. I would never presume to walk into a car factory and tell them what to do or how to be more efficient. So I can't speak to that, but I'm hopeful that it's helpful to developers, which that's where my heart is. I want us to have happier, more productive lives.
Excellent. One more super quick. So you may be familiar with a little something called 97 Things Every Cloud Engineer Should Know.
Yes.
Yes.
Read it a few times.
Yeah, maybe heard of that one.
Also, I want to highlight Nathan Harvey. Nathan Harvey is my co-curator on that, and he dragged that product over the finish line. So he deserves just as much credit.
Yeah. Nathan's good people. I love hanging out with that guy.
Nathan's amazing.
But the question is, how many things would be, on that list, that same list today, if you'd written it today? Right? Is it the same list now as it was then, or is it?
This was one of the funny things because the 97 thing is an O'Reilly thing. Like I don't know why they chose 97, but they chose it. It's novel, it sticks in your brain. I think whittling our industry down and all the considerations we have to think about, it's endless. I mean, you could make a list of 1,007 things and still be missing items. So it's, even with the spokes in that model, people are like, well, this is missing and this is missing. And they're absolutely right. But I figured if we put 22 spokes on there, we might get a little overwhelmed. Like it starts to be counterproductive. And so really just kind of focusing on, we're grouping things and trying to think about the major elements of something to push forward. And then we can always make little adjustments on those minor changes that help. Does that make sense?
It does. And thank you for that. Yeah. I feel like this could keep going. We should turn this into a fireside chat sometime. But we do have a lot more great content planned for our community and our audience today. So thank you so much, Emily, for coming through. Super appreciate it. Looking forward to learning more about the Revolution model. And let's do this again.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me. It was an honor.